Muling nagkapalitan ng putok ang militar at MNLF sa Zamboanga City kanina. Natakot ang ilang residente lalo't nakapasok ang grupo sa sentro ng lungsod. Live mula sa Zamboanga City, magbabandila si Paul Palacio. Paul, gaano katagal ang naging bakbakan kanina?
Julius, walang puknat ang bakbakan hanggang kaninang hapon na ikinasugat ng dalawang hinihinalang miyembro ng MNLF. Napatay din sa bakbakan ng isang tanod na napagkamalang miyembro ng rebeldeng grupo.
Umalingaw-ngaw na naman ang putukan nang muling magbakbakan ang militar at MNLF. Nakapasok na ang mga armadong grupo sa sentro ng Zamboanga City. Nagmamadaling lumikas ang mga tao sa kanilang mga bahay. Nag-agawan pa sila ng masasakyan para makalayo sa putukan. Ilan sa mga lumikas, nakapaan na lang, bitbit ang kanilang mga anak. May mga napaiyak. Natataranta at nagwawala si Aling Luz matapos makarinig ng sunod-sunod na putok.
Lapos ang bala, may alam ni maigo. Nagtindog mo dito. Punta na yung kating driver. Nay, lakaw na mo, nay. Lakaw na mo. Nay, labas na kayo. Labas! Konting bilis lang, konting bilis.
Mas lalong dumami ang mga sundalo. Dumating ang Philippine Marines para dagdagan ang tropa ng Army, Scout Rangers na nagbabantay sa Barangay Santa Barbara. Tahimik sila kapag tanghali. Pero matapos mananghalian, tuloy ulit ang putukan. Kaliwat kanan ang tunog ng radyo ng militar. Nagbibigay ng huling impormasyon sa mga nangyayari.
Trangki XR tap. Tawad ng muslim. Tawad ng muslim.
Sa gitna ng putukan, dinig din sa komunikasyon na may mga nadadaan ng mga armadong tao ang militar.
Yan ang delikado, baka mamaya yung MN nagsasabi lang na tanod dyan. I-freeze nyo, tapos disarmahan nyo muna yan.
Roger sir, Tadpol 1 Lotus.
Nagsara ang mga tindahan at gasolinahan. Nakaposa si Amadin na duwa matapos makipagbarilan sa mga pulis. Na-ospital din ang kasamang si Awari. Mga miyembro umano ng MNLF ang dalawa na nakuna ng mga baril.
Nagka-enkwentro po ba dito kanina, sir? Opo.
Opo.
Enkwentro.
Hindi pa ako nagawa ng baril sir.
May baril ka? Wala.
Doon po sa loob ng bag nilagay yung baril. Sa loob po ng bag nilagay nila yung baril.
Yung baril mo, saan?
Well, hindi po yun sa akin.
Hindi yun saan. Pero ikaw nagdala ng bag.
Binigay lang sa akin yung bag.
Pinasok ng mga sundalo ang ilang bahay sa barangay Santa Barbara na umano'y pinagtataguan ng MNLF. Pero wala silang inabutan. Umabot sa barangay Canilar ang bakbakan. May mga napagkamalang MNLF at masusing kinapkapan.
Sinta. Akusta. Doon po. Alya lang oh. Alya kami sakida.
Patay ang isang tanod matapos mapagkamalang MNLF. Sugatan ang 3 iba pa. 6 na barangay na ang apektado ng gulo. Muling nanunog ng mga bahay ang MNLF sa barangay Santa Barbara. Pero hinayaan na lang itong maapulan ng mga bumbero na hindi makapasok sa barangay. Mistulang ghost town naman ang mga lugar na naging sentro ng bakbakan ngayong gabi.
Julius, nagpapatupad na rin ng curfew hours dito sa Zamboanga City simula alas 8 ng gabi hanggang alas 5 ng madaling araw para masiguro ang kaligtasan ng mga residente. Julius?
Maraming salamat, Paul Palacio.
Thousands of residents fled as fresh fighting broke out on Wednesday between Philippine security forces and Muslim rebels on the 3rd day of a deadly siege in a key southern city, officials said. At least 13,000 people crammed into Zamboanga City Sports Stadium seeking safety as soldiers and rebels fought street battles in deserted coastal neighborhoods nearby, and a photographer on the scene said. We're trying our best to provide decent facilities for them, government social worker Beth Dye told us, but added the venue only had 4 portable toilets and no available bedding. About 5,000 residents from the 6 communities under siege arrived overnight and some had no choice but to pitch makeshift tents on the grass, she added. In the settlement of Santa Catalina 3 kilometers away, Philippine Marines exchanged fire on Wednesday with gunmen who were using 10 residents on a roadside as apparent human shields, and a photographer said. One of the residents was waving a white cloth tied to a pole, he added. People began fleeing the siege areas early Monday when about 180 Moro National Liberation Front (MNLF) guerrillas poured into 6 coastal neighborhoods of the port city of nearly 1 million people, triggering firefights with soldiers and police. The 6 communities are home to 160,000 mainly Muslim residents, according to local officials, who said about 180 residents were being used as human shields by the gunmen. The siege began 4 weeks after MNLF founder Nyor Misaweri declared independence for the Muslim regions of the mainly Catholic nation and urged his followers to besiege government installations. The MNLF ended a 25-year rebellion with a 1996 peace treaty, but Misaweri's faction laid a similar deadly siege on Zamboanga in 2001 that led to his imprisonment until 2008, when all charges against him were dropped. Misaweri has since been protesting against a proposed government peace deal with rival rebel faction the Moro Islamic Liberation Front (MILF) that he said would marginalize the MNLF and violate the terms of the 1996 peace deal. The latest attack on Zamboanga is led by a top Misaweri lieutenant, Habib Malik, and has left 12 people dead and 21 others injured, said military spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Raman Zagala. The latest fatality was an MNLF gunman whose body was recovered in one of the areas where the gunmen are holed up, he said in an interview on ABS-CBN television. Zamboanga Mayor Maria Isabel Climaco-Saleza told the station that local officials had been negotiating with Malik to free residents and leave the city, without much success. She said Misaweri could not be found. Our main priority really is the safety of all the hostages. The military should come in and try to secure the hostages and defend the city from further intrusion, she added. There has been some confusion over whether the residents are being held against their will, and the government on Tuesday said it was investigating whether they were hostages. It appears that what happened is not hostage-taking but more of them being turned into human shields by the MNLF forces who entered their communities, Interior Secretary Mark Roxas said. Zagala said the troops only had orders to surround the gunmen at this point, ensure the safety of the residents and prevent the crisis from spreading to other areas. Philippine forces were fighting Muslim rebels on two fronts on Thursday as clashes broke out near a southern city being besieged by guerrillas opposed to peace talks with the government, officials said. Moro National Liberation Front (MNLF) gunmen attacked army positions on Basilan Island, wounding at least 3 soldiers, the military said. Basilan is across a narrow strip of sea from Zamboanga, a major port city where about 180 MNLF fighters had been locked in sporadic clashes with troops since Monday, displacing about 13,000 residents. We would like to believe this is just part of their diversionary tactics, regional military spokesman Colonel Rodrigo Gregorio said of the Basilan attacks. He said 2 other guerrilla groups with links to the MNLF were also involved in the fighting in Basilan, a jungle-clad island that is a traditional stronghold of the militants. On the 4th day of the MNLF siege of Zamboanga, rebels fired mortars and snipers targeting government troops as they advanced on militant positions, ANF reporter said. The gunmen are followers of Nyor Misaweri, who founded the MNLF, which launched a long separatist rebellion in 1971. He made a renewed declaration of independence a month ago after alleging the government was violating the terms of a 1996 peace deal that created a Muslim self-rule area in the south by negotiating a separate peace deal with a rival faction, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front (MILF). Misaweri has accused the government of reneging on its promises and of sidelining his group in favor of the MILF, which is expected to take over an expanded autonomous region by 2016. The government insists the proposed deal with the MILF would honor the MNLF agreement as it seeks to end an insurgency that has killed some 150,000 people in the south of the mainly Catholic nation. The militants are hiding out among between 80 and 180 human shields in several neighborhoods on the city's outskirts, officials said. Social Welfare Secretary Corazon Suleiman said on Thursday that officials were trying to verify allegations that the gunman had raped some of the women. The alleged violations were reported by a resident who escaped from the gunman, she added. Gregorio said hundreds of elite soldiers backed by police had restricted the rebels' movement, but the presence of civilians was preventing any effort to end the siege by force. Military spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Ramon Zagala added, "We cannot just conduct offensive actions without taking account of the hostages." Apart from the 3 soldiers wounded in Basilan, 1 soldier was killed in a firefight with the rebels on Wednesday, when a village watchman who was mistaken for a guerrilla was fatally shot by the security forces, Gregorio said. The killing raised the death toll during the standoff to 14, including 3 civilians, 1 police officer, 2 soldiers and 8 rebels in 4 days of fighting. Gregorio said 2 MNLF stragglers fleeing the area were also arrested on Wednesday. Most members of the rank and file of the MNLF are already demoralized, he said. Zamboanga Mayor Maria Isabel Climaco-Saleza said she finally managed to reach Misaweri by telephone late Wednesday and asked him to call off the siege. She said Misaweri told her he had given his followers on the ground a free hand in deciding their fate. She said officials were moving to bring back vital services to the rest of the city of nearly 1 million, which has been paralyzed by the siege. She called on shops to reopen, doctors to remain in hospitals and for the public to remain calm as authorities established communication lines with rebel leaders to convince them to end the siege. I again appeal to the hostage takers, please let go of the hostages, especially the elderly, the sick, the children and people with disabilities, she said. Meanwhile, officials called on residents who had been holding out in their homes in the conflict areas to leave and head for safety. Philippine troops were clearing out the last remaining rebels after a 6-day operation in the south that killed dozens of militants and allowed scores of hostages to flee, officials said Saturday. Police estimated the Moro National Liberation Front (MNLF) gunmen were now holding as few as 7 civilian hostages in the southern port city of Zamboanga, compared to more than 100 a day earlier, Interior Secretary Mark Roxas said. His comments boosted hopes that the crisis, which had left entire neighborhoods razed to the ground by the gunmen and forced tens of thousands of residents to flee, would soon be resolved. By today, it's quite clear that not only is this incursion being contained, Roxas told reporters. From contained it has evolved into constriction, which is to reduce the operating space of the MNLF. Now it is into clearing. Relentless day and night operations by at least 3,000 elite government troops have killed 43 rebels while 19 others had been detained, said military spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Ramon Zagala. Right now we are optimistic that our operations are effective and that we are delivering a significant blow to our enemies, he told UFP. We hope that we can finish this calibrated response at the soonest possible time, he said, while refusing to give a timetable. He cautioned that the remaining gunmen were still dangerous, and the presence of civilians in neighborhoods where the remnants were hiding out meant the military could only use light weaponry. He said the military and police forces had suffered 6 dead while 4 civilians were also killed. The optimistic assessment of the operation came hours after Vice President Chijoma Baine offered to broker a ceasefire between the government and MNLF leader Misaweri. Baine, the country's number 2 elected official, followed President Benigno Aquino to Zamboanga on Saturday to discuss with the Filipino leader a ceasefire plan that he said he had also raised with Misaweri. The truce was tentatively scheduled to take effect at midnight, 1600 GMT, Saturday, a spokesman for the vice president told UFP. There was no immediate report on what transpired during his meeting with Aquino. Roxas confirmed the Aquino-Baine meeting had taken place, but said the president had not ordered the military to stop their operations against the MNLF. The standoff began on Monday, when heavily armed MNLF forces entered Zamboanga's coastal districts and took hostages in a bid to scupper peace talks between another militant group and the government. At one time the gunmen used nearly 200 civilians as human shields, officials said. The rebels also forced groups of the hostages to stand between them and attacking military units. The fighting forced 69,000 people to flee their homes, the Civil Defense Office said. Nearly 500 houses were torched by the rebels, who shot at fire trucks sent to attend to the blazes, City Fire Marshal Dominador Zabala told reporters. The MNLF waged a 25-year guerrilla war for independence before signing a peace treaty in 1996 that granted limited self-rule to the South's Muslim minority. Misaweri, who was accused the government of violating the terms of a 1996 treaty by negotiating a separate deal with a rival faction, had disappeared from public view shortly before the fighting began Monday. The rival faction, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front (MILF), is in the final stages of peace talks with Manila and is expected to take over an expanded autonomous region in the south by 2016. President Aquino said the peace talks with the MILF aimed to end decades of rebellion that had claimed 150,000 lives in the country's southern regions. Philippine troops on Sunday were closing in on Muslim rebel positions and cutting off escape routes to end a week-long standoff that has left more than 60 people dead in the southern city of Zamboanga, officials said. Sporadic clashes continued as soldiers moved to clear Moro National Liberation Front (MNLF) gunmen from coastal neighborhoods after a ceasefire plan collapsed, with thousands more residents fleeing to safety. As troops moved through the Santa Barbara district on Sunday, the extent of the damage from 7 days of fighting came into full view, with buildings reduced to smoldering heaps or pockmarked with bullet holes, an UFP reporter said. Soldiers recovered the bodies of 2 slain gunmen still clinging to their rifles, and several unexploded warheads for use in rocket-propelled grenades had been left behind by the fleeing rebels. In the distance, black smoke billowed from another area that had just gone up in flames. And in a nearby district, a group of soldiers could be seen crouched on the street as sniper fire whizzed just above their heads, television footage showed. We are continuing to press forward with our calibrated military response, military spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Roman Zagala told UFP. Fighting is continuing as we speak. They continue to resist and conduct offensive actions against us. Heavily armed MNLF forces entered the port city's coastal neighborhoods Monday and took dozens of hostages in a bid to scupper peace talks between another militant group and the government aimed at ending a decades-long rebellion in the south. Zagala said the fighting was concentrated in 2 coastal districts, while other areas were now secure. Day and night operations by at least 3,000 elite government troops have now seen 51 MNLF rebels killed, as well as 6 soldiers, a policeman and 4 civilians. Air and sea ports remained closed Sunday in a crisis that has paralyzed the city of 1 million, seen entire neighborhoods razed to the ground, and forced tens of thousands to flee. Police on Saturday estimated that the gunmen were holding as few as 7 civilian hostages, compared to more than 100 a day earlier, with many either escaping or being allowed to go free. Social Welfare Secretary Corazon Suleiman said the number of people who had fled to temporary shelters had risen to more than 69,000 by Sunday morning. The number swelled yesterday because thousands more evacuated from areas the rebels were likely to use as escape routes, she told UFP. We hope they will be able to go home in the coming week, she said, while stressing that it was too early to say if the fighting would be over by then. A ceasefire plan brokered by Vice President Chijoma Bine and MNLF leader Nuor Misaweri was abandoned on Saturday after the 2 sides failed to agree terms. The MNLF waged a 25-year guerrilla war for independence before signing a peace treaty in 1996 that granted limited self-rule to the South's Muslim minority. Misaweri, who was accused the government of violating the terms of a 1996 treaty by negotiating a separate deal with a rival faction, had disappeared from public view shortly before the fighting began Monday. The rival faction, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, MILF, is in the final stages of peace talks with Manila and is expected to take over an expanded autonomous Muslim region in the south by 2016. President Binayago Aquino said the peace talks with the MILF aimed to end decades of rebellion that had claimed 150,000 lives in the country's Muslim southern regions.
The Philippine military launched a helicopter assault on Monday at Muslim rebels occupying parts of a major southern city, stepping up efforts to end an 8-day standoff that has left dozens dead. 2 Air Force helicopters fired rocket rounds towards Moro National Liberation Front (MNLF) rebels held up in coastal villages in Zamboanga City, an OFP reporter witnessed, as the military confirmed the attacks. This is a precision close air support directed by ground troops to suppress the enemy, military spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Roman Zagala told OFP. The helicopter assault was the first airstrikes since troops began their offensive on Friday to defeat the MNLF forces, who have been using civilians as human shields. Asked about the potential for the civilians to be caught up in the helicopter assaults, Zagala emphasized they were precision strikes. Zagala said earlier on Monday up to 100 MNLF rebels were still engaged in ground battles with troops around the 2 coastal villages, a week after the guerrillas invaded Zamboanga to stake an independence claim. Zagala said the rebels were defiant in the face of the military advance. They still have ammunition and they continue to fire at us, he said, but insisted the military was very close to victory after taking some rebel positions at the weekend. We know for a fact that the end is near and they are trying to flee. Some of them may be trying to disguise as civilians, so it's very critical that the village elders help us identify those who are not from their neighborhoods. Heavily armed MNLF forces entered the port city's coastal neighborhoods on Monday last week in a bid to sabotage talks between a rival rebel group and the government that are aimed at ending decades of conflict. Muslim rebels have been fighting since the 1970s for an independent or autonomous homeland in the south of the mainly Catholic Philippines. An estimated 150,000 people have died in the fighting. The latest violence in Zamboanga has left 51 MNLF fighters, 6 security forces and 4 civilians dead, according to Zagala. The rebels initially took dozens of hostages and burned hundreds of homes, forcing a shutdown of Zamboanga, a city of about 1 million that is a key commercial hub in the region. Zagala said MNLF rebels on Monday torched a section of Santa Barbara, one of the neighborhoods they had occupied, to slow down the military advance. Volleys of gunfire were heard ringing out across Santa Barbara before the helicopter assault, while sniper fire from the rebels prevented firemen from approaching the burning community, an AFP reporter said. After its Philippine representative visited Zamboanga, the New York-based Human Rights Watch expressed concern for civilians trapped in the conflict. As many as 300 civilians in one village had sought shelter in an ice plant building after abandoning their homes, while others had stayed behind to protect their belongings, it said. Nearly 70,000 people have already fled the fighting and international humanitarian agencies have rushed aid. Classes as well as ferry and air services remain suspended for an 8th consecutive day in Zamboanga, as local businessmen warned of severe consequences to the local economy. Zamboanga, about 850 kilometers (528 miles) south of the capital Manila, is a former Spanish fort during colonial times famous for its thriving barter trade with neighboring countries. Today, it is a major industrial and trading hub for the south, while one of its most important economic sectors is a sardine-producing industry. The MNLF waged a 25-year guerrilla war for independence before signing a peace treaty in 1996 that granted limited self-rule to the South's Muslim minority. MNLF founder Nyor Missouri deployed the gunman to Zamboanga after accusing the government of sidelining his group during negotiations for a separate deal with a rival rebel group. The rival faction, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front (MILF), is in the final stages of peace talks with Manila and is aiming to take over an expanded autonomous Muslim region in the south by 2016. The siege began after Missouri's men went to Zamboanga to plant an independence flag.
Today on Rappler.
Ito pong first batch, base sa mga dokumento at base sa mga kwento ng whistleblowers, ito nga yung mga habitual na series of transactions na hindi lang isa, dalawa, tatlo. Pagpaulit-ulit, ginamit yung mga Napoles NGOs.
Senator Estrada, Enrile, and Revilla face plunder charges for the pork barrel scam. The military launches airstrikes against MNLF rebels on day 8 of the Zamboanga City siege. And UN Chief Ban Ki-moon will present a report on Syria's chemical weapons. What a day it has been. Hello, I'm Maria Ressa. Welcome to Rappler, your social news network. It's plunder charges for Janet Napoles and her alleged network of conspirators for systematically diverting funds to fake non-governmental organizations. Among those charged are 3 senators and 5 congressmen. Natasha Gutierrez reports.
A truckload of evidence, whistleblowers, and a case investigators call airtight. About 2 months since details of the pork barrel scam was made public, the National Bureau of Investigation finally files charges at the Ombudsman. Lawmakers are accused of conniving with alleged syndicate head Janet Lim Napoles to siphon development funds commonly known as pork barrel.
Ito pong first batch, base sa mga dokumento at base sa mga kwento ng whistleblowers, ito nga yung mga habitual na series of transactions na. Hindi lang 1, 2, 3. At paulit-ulit, ginamit yung mga Napoles NGOs.
38 face criminal charges. But what makes it so explosive? It's a rogues gallery of supposedly honorable men. 3 senators, Juan Ponce Enrile, Jinggoy Estrada, and Bong Revilla, are charged with plunder, along with 2 former members of the lower house, Rizalina Cichon Lanete and Edgar Valdez. 3 other lawmakers face charges of malversation, bribery, and other graft and corrupt practices, including former Congressman Rodolfo Plaza, Samuel Dangwa, and Constantino Haraula.
Why do we say plunder? When said lawmakers each accumulated more than 50 million pesos, which is the, as you know, yung pong threshold amount for plunder, through a series of transactions over time, through misappropriation, conversion, misuse, and malversation of the cash value of the project cost allocated from the lawmakers' PDAF. Doon naman po sa tatlo, bakit ho hindi plunder? At bakit ang recommendation lang po namin is for malversation, direct bribery, and other graft and corrupt practices? Ay dahil yung pinaka-basis po ditong, yung threshold na amount, yung supposedly kickback nila, the commission, the rebates from Napoles, less than 50 million, although yung kanilang total PDAF allocations ay more than 50 million.
The list also includes 8 staff members of the lawmakers, 5 heads of agencies, and 10 employees, and 6 bogus NGO presidents. The 38 person facing charges, Napoles herself.
The 38 individual being recommended to be charged for plunder in the case of as co-conspirator, in the case of the 5 lawmakers being charged for plunder, and also as a co-conspirator in the case of the 3 other lawmakers being charged for malversation and corruption of public officials, is Miss Janet Lim Napoles, the owner of the JLN group of companies and believed to be the mastermind of the PDAF scam operations.
But this is only the beginning. The 38 names are only the first of 3 batches of cases the NBI plans to file.
Next week, we will file the Malampaya, the case regarding the Malampaya scam. And then, hopefully the week after next, the second batch of the PDAF scam complaints. Yun po ang plano po ng NBI.
The Ombudsman must now evaluate the evidence, a process that will take weeks given the mountain of documents. De Lima says she will issue a lookout bulletin for the 38 respondents to monitor their movements. All are free to leave the country until the case reaches the courts, except Napoles, who is in jail. Historic. This is the word De Lima uses to describe the filing of the first batch of cases. Will this be enough for an angry public that marched in Luneta? Will Big Fish finally be put behind bars for stealing the people's money? Natasha Gutierrez, Rappler, Manila.
Responding to the plunder case filed against them over the pork barrel scam, Senators Bong Revilla Jr. and Jinggoy Estrada deny involvement in the scam and ask the public not to judge them. The 2 are among those accused of endorsing fake non-governmental organizations for their pork barrel in exchange for kickbacks. Senate Minority Leader Juan Ponce Enrile, also a respondent in the case, missed Monday's Senate session. His staff and allies say Enrile was rushed to the hospital Saturday because of high blood pressure. In a statement, Enrile says the plunder case is filed after, quote, an incomplete, hasty, and partial investigation. He adds, let me make clear that I'm innocent of the charges filed against me. Holding back tears and with his voice cracking, Revilla tells reporters, I ask the Filipino people, do not judge us. We will explain until the very end. Like Revilla, Estrada says he will face the charges against him but uses a stronger tone.
Sapagkat ako po ay walang kinalaman sa anumang kamalian o katiwalian sa paggamit ng PDAF allocation sa Senado. Handa ko pong sagutin at ipaliwanag sa lahat ang mga ito sapagkat kailanman ay hindi ko dinungisan o balak dungisan ang pangalan ng aming pamilya.
Estrada also belittles the case against him, saying the evidence is just the Commission on Audit report and the endorsement letters.
If the sole basis for plunder are the endorsements in the COA report, I don't think endorsing an NGO is a crime.
Senate President Franklin Drilon says a warrant of arrest will effectively suspend lawmakers charged in the pork barrel scam. In a television interview, Drilon says the non-bailable offense merits a suspension because, quote, the lawmaker is prevented from reporting for work. The Department of Justice filed plunder cases against Senators Bong Revilla Jr. and Junggoy Estrada. Plunder carries a penalty of life imprisonment and perpetual disqualification from public office. Drilon earlier said legislators cannot be suspended until they're convicted because Congress has the power to discipline its members. But on Monday, Drilon says once arrest warrants are issued, the lawmakers will be under the court's jurisdiction. Drilon says the controversy taints the Senate's image, but adds it's going through, quote, a cleansing process. He adds, it's difficult to process, but it's our obligation to strengthen this institution of democracy. It started Monday last week. About 200 Moro National Liberation Front rebels entered the coastal barangays of Zamboanga City and took about 180 hostages. The ragtag army is a shadow of the old MNLF, which negotiated a peace deal with the government in 1996. This attack was their show of force in defiance of the new peace deal the government is hammering with its breakaway group, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, now the more dominant rebel organization. Carmela Fonbuena reports.
It's day 8 of the Zamboanga crisis. It's not over, but government troops are making headway against the faction of the Moro National Liberation Front, led by Commander Javier Malik. The MNLF shut down the city, turning 4 barangays into a battleground. Government statistics say at least 62 are dead, over 100 are wounded, 70,000 are evacuated, and hundreds of houses razed to the ground.
Our forces are working doubly hard, using all our assets that is available for us in order that we have a speedy resolution. And of course, keeping in mind always the safety of our civilian populace, most especially our hostages, that their lives may be preserved, and so does the other civilians who are trapped.
For the first time, airstrikes are used, targeting Rio Hondo, a coastal barangay where Malik is believed to be holed up. The military says the rebels are down to 100 from the original 200 who attacked the city. Malik, the top aide of MNLF founder Nur Miswari, says he is ready to die. The rebels continue to respond with their remaining might. There's also fear that fleeing rebels could launch attacks outside the battle zone.
To the barangay officials, please be always on alert. The enemies are fleeing the areas of constriction, and so you have to set up early warning systems and set up ways to ensure that people roaming in your barangays are legitimate residents of your area.
Even as government steps up attacks, residents remain terrorized. The standoff has dragged on for too long. The Zamboanga crisis does not end with the military defeating Malik's forces. The standoff has brought Zamboanga City down to its knees, severely damaging business, tourism, and the morale of the people. The next challenge is how to rise again. Carmela Fonbuena, Rappler, Zamboanga City.
The Moro National Liberation Front releases at least 26 hostages Monday evening. The Zamboanga City government's Twitter account says the official list of hostages will be released after they're screened and processed. Zamboanga City Councilor Benjamin Gingona says 3 of the hostages are injured and are now being treated. The Human Rights Watch says an estimated 300 civilians are trapped in an ice plant building in Barangay Rio Hondo, Zamboanga City, while others remain trapped in at least 5 villages. The group says soldiers stopped some civilians from leaving while others fear getting caught in the crossfire. In a statement Monday, the group says residents fear they would be accused of being rebels and could be, quote, subject to government attack or mistreatment in custody. Human Rights Watch Asia Director Brad Adams says government forces should not be making blanket assumptions about whether individuals are rebels based on whether they have proper documents or not. The group also says the military may have violated the laws of war by stationing forces in a hospital. State Weather Bureau Pagasa says the low-pressure area east of Luzon develops into Tropical Depression Odette. As of 4 p.m. Monday, its center is spotted 930 kilometers east of Casiguran, Aurora. It's forecast to move west-northwest. No storm warning signals are up, but the tropical depression is expected to enhance the southwest monsoon, bringing rain over parts of Luzon. The White House announces U.S. President Barack Obama will make his first trip to the Philippines in October. In a statement Friday, the White House says Obama will travel to Indonesia, Brunei, Malaysia, and the Philippines as part of his ongoing commitment to increase U.S. political, economic, and security engagement with the Asia-Pacific. Obama will be in Manila October 11 to 12. Manila will be Obama's last stop. Malacanang spokesperson Edwin Lacherde says Obama will meet with Philippine President Benigno Aquino to, quote, discuss ways to further strengthen the enduring Philippines-U.S. alliance, including the expansion of our security, economic, and people-to-people ties. Obama's visit comes as both countries negotiate an agreement that will allow increased rotational presence of American troops in the Philippines and give them wider access to the country's military bases. United Nations Chief Ban Ki-moon is set to reveal the findings of a UN investigation team of serious chemical weapons. He will present the report to the UN Security Council in New York at 11:15 a.m. That's 11:15 p.m. in Manila. The UN report will influence any attempt by the Security Council to agree on a resolution backing the Russia-US accord on the dismantling of serious chemical weapons. On Sunday, a Syrian minister calls the U.S.-Russia deal, quote, a victory for the regime of President Bashar al-Assad. In Geneva last week, U.S. State Secretary John Kerry and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov discussed the plan to destroy Syria's chemical weapons by mid-2014. Syria's information minister says Damascus would commit to the plan once it has United Nations approval. Well, let's now look at Rappler's Wrap for today, a list of the 10 most important events around the world you shouldn't miss. At number 5, U.S. State Secretary John Kerry warns the threat of U.S. military action against Syria remains, in his words, real. This comes a day after it struck a deal with Russia to destroy Damascus's chemical weapons stockpile. Kerry says, make no mistake, we've taken no options off the table. The U.S. earlier warned of a military strike on the Syrian regime after a chemical attack last month in Damascus. At number 8, a pair of converted military drones are the U.S. Space Agency's newest tools for tracking hurricanes and tropical storms. The 2 Global Hawks began operating as NASA drones in 2012 to improve forecasters' ability to predict hurricanes. The drones operate in most active months of the Atlantic hurricane season. And at number 9, a Filipino-language rock opera on the life of Filipino Saint Lorenzo Ruiz is staged at the De La Salle College. Lorenzo is a play within a play, a postmodern story where the artistic process that leads to the creation of the play becomes part of the story. The play is directed by acclaimed Nonon Padilla and features the music of Ryan Cayabyab. For the full top 10, visit Rappler.com's The Wrap. Derrick Rose, the youngest player to win the NBA's Most Valuable Player award, is in the Philippines for the last stop of his Asian tour. On Saturday, Rose watched the Adidas 3-on-3 Grand Finals. He holds a press conference Monday before heading to the Mall of Asia atrium to join a video game contest in the afternoon. In an interview with Rappler, the Chicago Bulls star, who's coming off a knee injury, explains why he decided to sit out this season despite being cleared to play.
I had to think about my future, and at the time I wasn't 100%. I wasn't able to take on the double teams, so I knew that I could get around one person, but two people, I wasn't ready for that at first.
Rose, a Chicago native, looks up to NBA great Michael Jordan. When asked which other player he admires the most, he pauses before answering.
I'll have to say, that's a tough one, man. Larry Bird. I think for someone to be not athletic and still like go out there and score 40 points in an NBA game, like that shows you how hard he worked. He just outworked people. So, like, I can understand that. Like, I can relate to it.
Every story on Rappler has a mood meter, which gives you 8 emotions to choose from. Click how you feel, and your vote comes down to the mood navigator in the middle of the front page. That crowdsources the mood of the day. It also gives you the top 10 stories that have affected our readers the most. These 10 stories have gotten the most number of votes on the mood meter. If we look today, it's a fascinating story they tell. We take a look, the story that's dominated headlines over the last week. Javier Malik, we're ready to die. He spoke to Rappler's Carmela Fonbuena yesterday. The stories from Zamboanga tend to all be this. Red, 58% angry. Glenda Gloria's Miswari Myths and the MNLF Context, 65% angry. But interestingly enough, when you go to the other major story of the day, the press conference, DOJ press con on cases versus lawmakers in the PDAF scam, you have 85% happy. The plunder complaints that were filed against Estrada and JPE and Revilla, another 87% happy. Fascinating though, if you look, the story that's gotten the most votes today, lawmakers face the PDAF scam cases. There's 52% afraid and then only 5% happy. However, if you put all of the happy votes together, the green dominates today. Most people are happy. Historic, in the words of Laila de Lima, filing of plunder complaints against lawmakers. That is Rappler's newscast for today, Monday, September 16, 2013. Visit Rappler.com and watch our newscast Monday to Friday. Tell us how you feel on our mood meter and help us crowdsource the mood of the day. I'm Maria Ressa. As we say at Rappler, tomorrow begins today.